Welcome to another night at Sub 30 where we empower you to make better life decisions so you can live with fewer regrets. We're so excited that you could join us from wherever you are. Just a quick recap. In the last 4 weeks, we've been doing a teaching. Basically, I've been teaching through some of the lessons that I've learned from the year 2020, and we've done 4 so far. You can always go back to this page, check them out, and you can tag somebody. You can send them to somebody who you think will really could use some kind of like refresher or recap some of the good things we've learned from 2020. So last week I talked about the importance of good leadership, especially in a crisis, and I shared 6 tools that I said these are the tools that you would need to lead yourself or others through a crisis. And these are the 6 tools. I said you need a clear vision, and I said you need strong commitment, you need consistency, you need courage, you need constraints or boundaries, and finally I said you need compassion. Today I'll be talking about my 4th important lesson that I learned from 2020, and that is embracing the pause. Embracing the pause. Do me a favor, if you just joining us, if you don't mind, to just share this with you. Share this on your social media page so you can invite others to watch with you, because we believe in the next few moments that we have, we're going to give you some tools. We will empower you with some tools to help you make better life decisions so you can live with fewer regrets. So, for most of us, at least for me, prior to 2020, my life was in a constant motion for a very long time. In fact, the first time I ever took a vacation, my first vacation ever was on our honeymoon. And it's really sad because my life was just on a go, non-stop. It was just moving from one thing to the next, constantly going, and never taking a pause to breathe. So one of the few positives from 2020 for me and my family was the pandemic kind of forced me to take a break. It forced me to break free from the life of constant moving, of constant motion, and instead to pause for a moment. So 2020 really forced me to pause, and it was strange and unfamiliar for me. I'm sure it was for some of you as well, like this thing of pausing for a moment. So we were all of a sudden introduced to a world that many of us could not have wrapped our minds around prior to this. We had to think on the go, or may I even say we had to think on the break, to think on the pause. And the long pause, it was a long pause, and it was like we were all invited to take an inventory of our lives and the true meaning of all our labors and our never-ending business. So one of the things 2020 did for us, we were forced to evaluate our business against our effectiveness. And that was tough for many people. For someone like me, that was very tough, to just take a pause to evaluate my life, because I had no option. So this pause was forced on us, was forced on many of us. Some dealt with it well, others not really. So today I want to share about embracing the pause. The pause is basically moments in your life where things are not going as fast as you would like them to go, or where things are not going as you want them to go, where nothing is going as you plan. And it's like you're in this phase of life where you take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and it seems like nothing is going right. It's like you're in a hole. It's like your whole life is on a standstill. That is what the pause is. And I want to share today how to embrace the pause and how to make the best out of the pause. But let me start by saying I am no expert in this. In fact, I struggle a whole lot with taking a break. I struggle. If I can be totally honest with you, I struggle with the pause, because I'm not wired that way. It's not my DNA. For someone like my wife, she can handle the pause much more better than I can. I struggle with just hitting the pause, hitting the brake, pumping the brakes, and just say let's just reevaluate things. So think of this as one vulnerable student sharing with other vulnerable students on how to embrace the pause. I'm not an expert in this area, not the very least at all, but I, you know, I'm I'm learning, so to speak. So let's jump in this together. So here are a few things that I learned from just embracing the pause. So the first lesson that I learned, and this is so good. The pause is an invitation to trust God more than yourself. The pause is an invitation to trust God more than yourself. And this is really hard for someone like me who I want to have things in a certain way. I want to have all the I's dotted, all the T's crossed. Basically, I want to have things in my control. I want to be able to control things the way I want to be able to control things the way I want them to be. I want to be able to control the outcome. I want to be able to control the process. But what the pause does for us is basically you surrendering control. The pause invites you when you're in a pause, when you're in a place of life where things are not going the way you want them to go. It's basically an invitation for you to surrender control to God instead of you managing everything the way you want it to go. And that, like I said, that's really tough for some of us, especially for someone like me. It's very tough. So when you're in this place of pause, God is inviting you, is drawing you to this place of full and total surrender, where you give up control to Him, where you surrender control to Him. Because if you don't, it reaches to a point where He would take it somehow from you because of His love for you. And that's even worse than you having to surrender it to Him. That's even harder, let me put it that way, than you having to surrender it to Him. So that's what the pause does for you. It invites you to the space where you are like, God, I just lay this on your foot. I just lay this on your throne. I lay this on your altar, and you have it your way. See, David went through a season like that, and in fact, in Psalm 48, verses 8 to 10, reads this. There's a beautiful passage, right? And the psalmist says, "Come." This is an invitation. It says, "Come, see the glorious works of the Lord. See how He brings the destruction. See how He brings destruction upon the world." On one hand, He's inviting you to witness how God brings destruction upon the world. And on the other hand, it continues in Psalm 46:9. It says, "He causes wars to end throughout the earth. He breaks the bows and snaps the spears. He burns the shield with fire." So think about it. Verse 8, He's calling you to witness the destruction that God brings on the earth. Verse 9, He's calling you to witness how God is ending all destruction and bringing total peace. How God is changing chaos. So you're called to witness these two sides of God, these two sides of war and chaos and destruction, and the other side of where He's snapping the bows and breaking the arrows and burning the shield, totally annihilating every war and every chaos. And guess what verse 10 says? So in this invitation to come witness, God says, "Be still and know that I am God." In other words, you've been called to this place to witness this whole thing happening. And He's saying, you are just a witness. You have no control over any of these. You just have to be still and know that I am God. In other words, you have to be still and trust me with the process and with the outcome. And that's tough. That's tough because it's a place of full surrender, a place of full trust. And we sometimes, this is one of the ways we get to to ourselves, not to anybody, to ourselves, our level of trust and faithfulness in God. When we can fully surrender, when we can fully trust God with the process and the outcome. And that's what God calls us, invites us here to do in Psalm 46 verses 8 to 10. So that's the first thing. The pause is an invitation to trust God completely. It's an invitation to trust God completely, because you're in a place, you're in a state of mind, a state of being where you literally have little to no control of things happening in your life, and the only thing you can control is to surrender it to God. And here's the second lesson I learned about the pause. Again, like I said, the pause, I define the pause as a place where it feels like things are not going as you plan, or things are not going as quickly as you plan, where it feels like you're taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. So here's the second thing that I learned about the pause. A pause is not a stop. A pause is like a comma, but not a period or a full stop. A pause is not a stop. And this is so important to remember, because all of us will take pauses along the way. If you live long enough, you will go through 1 or 2 pauses in life, whether you initiate the pause or whether the pause is forced upon you. However we come upon the pause in life, it is so important, especially when you are in the middle of a very long pause, whether it's in your health or your career or your relationship or whatever it is where things are not going as planned. It is important to remember that a pause is not a stop. See, there was this story I heard of this young lady who was going through a very long pause in her life. It seemed like nothing was going right for her. She was in postgraduate doing a PhD and was so busy that she had to break off her relationship with the guy, with a fiancé at that time. They were engaged to be married, but she was so busy, she felt it wasn't fair to her or to the guy. She didn't have time for the relationship, so she called it off. And to cap it off, it seemed like everything else in her friend's life or her colleague's life, everything was happening for them. It's like things were going great for everyone but her. It felt like her life was just a crumble, and everything, like she was stuck in a rut, and nothing was going right for her. So she would often go to her father, she would often go to her dad for advice, and this one day, her dad gave her this piece of advice that stuck with her. Her dad said, you are like a catapult, and you're like a catapult that has been pulled all the way back. And he said, you're not a failure, or you've not ruined your life, you're just in a long pause. And I think a long pause that someday will be over. And I think the dad really gets it. He really gets what it means to be in a pause, that you're like a catapult, you're being pulled back, but someday when you're released, you're going to go much more further. So a pause is not a stop. It's just a temporary pause, and someday you'll be released from that pause for you to go much further. So if you're in the place right now where you feel like your life it's not in the motion that you want it to go, it's not in the direction or the plans that you have for it, don't get fully discouraged. Don't be discouraged, because a pause is not a stop. It's literally a pause, and there'll be time for that pause will come to an end. It will come to an end. And I love how the message paraphrases Psalm 30 verse 5. It says, the night of crying your eyes out will give way to days of laughter. And I just need to speak that over somebody. Your night of crying your eyes out will give way to days of laughter. I don't know who this is for, but I hope you receive it, that the night of crying your eyes out will give way to days of laughter. Your pause will someday come to an end. I cannot predict when, but I can only tell you it'll come to an end. And when it does, the night of crying your eyes out will give way to the days of laughter. Psalm 30 verse 5. So critical, especially when you're in the pause. to not give up in the pause, to not surrender the will of God. And T.D. Jakes said something one time that I thought it was so important. He said, never forget in the dark what God promised you in the light. Because when we're in the dark, when we're in the pause, sometimes we can forget what God may have promised us in the season of light. Because the dark is in between two seasons of light. The pause is in between two seasons of whatever God is doing in your life. And the pause is not a waste of time. It is a season of growth. And the next person, I think the next person that I'll talk about really exemplify this. And that's my third point. The pause is a season to reinvent yourself. The pause is a season to reinvent yourself. It's a time to take a deep and honest account of your life. True evaluation to evaluate who you are and what you really believe and what you stand for. It's a time it gives you the opportunity for a fresh insight and a new point of view, like to see life through a different prism. It gives you the opportunity to see life through a different prism than you have in time past. And Moses, more than most people, exemplifies this because he was in one of the longest pauses in history. About a third of his life was in a pause. About 40 years of Moses' life was a pause. Think about that. A third of his life was a pause. He spent the first 40 years in Egypt, the second 40 years in the wilderness, a pause, and the third 40 years leading Israel out of slavery. And he spent that time of pause to reinvent himself, from being the son raised in the palace to the shepherd in the wilderness to the great leader called by God that freed his people. So I don't know what season of life you may be in a pause right now, or maybe you may have been coming from one, but I guarantee you all of us will go through one or two pauses in our lives, and how you handle the pause will make a big difference whatever the next phase of life will be. And let me pause and say this right now, no pun intended. If you are watching this and you are like, well, I'm going to pause and I don't know what is going to happen, or I don't know what's going on with my life, and I just need people to talk to, we have small groups that we'll call sub-5s. We have small groups for us. Our small groups are so important to us. I was telling our leadership, we meet every Thursday at 6 o'clock, and I was telling our leadership, the small group that we have, our sub-5s, they are more important, very much more important than the teaching that I do. So if you're watching this, if you want to get the best out of this, is for you to join the way you can get the best out of whatever I'm teaching is for you to be part of a smaller group, which is the sub-5. So if you're watching this and you're not part of a small group, you're not part of our sub-5, do me a favor, just send, just type in the chat group or community, and we will reach out to you. We will get you plugged in a small group where you can be with people, where you can share intimately, and they can empower you, they can hold you accountable, they can support you, whether you're in a season of pause or whether you will be in a season of pause. This group of people will come around you with the best support that you would need for that season of your life. So if you're watching this and you're not part of one of our sub-5s, just take a break right now, just type the word community or group in the chat, and we will get in touch with you. We will connect you with a group of people that will help you even much more better to make better life decisions and live with fewer regrets. And before I close, I wouldn't do you a justice, I wouldn't do you a favor if I don't give you the opportunity. If you're watching this and you don't have a relationship with Christ, I want to pause and invite you into a relationship with Christ. Just like how I said that pause is an invitation to trust God fully. And there's no better invitation to trust God fully than to be in a relationship with Christ. So if you're watching this and you don't have a relationship with Christ, would you take a moment to pray with me? Dear Jesus, I welcome you in my life. From this day forward, I choose to make you my Lord and Savior. And I fully surrender my life and everything about me to you. Amen. If you just prayed that prayer for the first time, welcome to the God family. We're so excited. The Bible says that there are angels in heaven that are celebrating the fact that you just made the decision to follow Christ, and that is the best decision you can ever make. Do me a favor, text the word accepted to the number that is going to be in the chart. It's a 484 number is 484-997-7147. Text the word accepted to it, and we will follow up with you to give you the necessary tools as a person who just accepted Christ. So, just to wrap it up quickly, this is the fourth lesson that I learned from the year 2020, and it's called Embracing. And the title of this message today is Embracing the Pause. I said embracing the pause, the first thing it does for us is that it's an invitation to fully surrender and trust God completely. And the second is to remember that a pause is not a stop. And the third is to remember that a pause is a season to reinvent yourself. I'm so glad that you were able to join us today, and I cannot wait to see you next Thursday at 7 p.m. Go be part of a small group and even get to go a little deeper with this message. I love you. God bless you. And see you next Thursday.